In most single-player games, death and failure states are done very simplistically. You die, you restart. Most of the time you restart at the nearest checkpoint or somewhere else a little further back from the place you died. Most games follow this recipe pretty accurately. The Witcher 3, Doom, Fallout, Skyrim, Half-Life, Metal Gear Solid, and Super Mario do this, just to name a few. Whenever you die in any of these games, you more or less get the same thing. A game over screen and the ability to retry the scenario you just failed, like it never happened. How far you're put back of course depends on the game, but on average you won't be set back more than a couple of minutes at most. And this system does work really well in some games, like in Celeste for instance. This game is a platformer very similar to Super Meat Boy. This game is very difficult and very unforgiving. You die quickly and often need to pull off skillful maneuvers in order to progress. Making one mistake will kill you, and because of that, being able to restart quickly and get back into action fast works really well here. It becomes a trial and error game, where it isn't death that means you fail, it's giving up and not being skillful enough to complete the stages and finish the game that means you fail. Making death not a failure state, but still a punishing mechanic that holds the player back from reaching their goal. This is a great way to handle death. Now let's take a look at the newer Resident Evil Remake. If you play on the hardcore difficulty in this game, you are forced to use consumable ink ribbons to save your game. You can only save the game by using these, and the game only gives you a limited amount, so you need to manage them by deciding when to use them. You could use a lot of them early to make sure you don't lose much progress while you're learning the game, but you could also keep them for later when the game might become more difficult, or you could do something entirely different. This gives the player the ability to control and tailor their own gameplay experience by choosing how impactful their deaths are throughout the game, with a drawback that they need to be mindful of. This is also a great way to handle death. But now let's take a look at Skyrim, a game that almost everyone has played and almost everyone considers to be quite good. Skyrim uses death very traditionally. You die, you restart at the last save. You can even save the game manually and quick load that way. But in an RPG like Skyrim, do you really want death to be this simple? I don't think so. I think that dying should be one of the things the player should fear the most. Whenever a bandit asks you to either hand over your gold or he'll kill you, the answer is obvious to any player that has played the game for more than 2 hours. Losing your gold will have an actual impact on your playthrough, since you'll have to earn some gold again. If the bandit kills you, you lose nothing except a small amount of time, and you forget all about your death a few seconds after it happens, because it didn't matter at all. Dying is very close to meaningless in Skyrim. It does make sense why this happens in so many games. Death just doesn't exist for the player, because the story can't continue when the player dies, and that's fine. It's okay that the player still somehow survives after losing a fight, but do we really have to go back in time like it never happened? I don't think so. This should really be a no-brainer in an RPG like Skyrim. What's the point of having a role-playing game if no matter how you choose to play, you are a god that can manipulate time and space by undoing your death instantly and reverting back to previous scenarios in your playthrough, both manually and automatically. In games where death matters, there are so many more tense and exciting moments. Being close to death feels amazing. That moment in Resident Evil when you're one hit away from death, with no healing supplies left, constantly on alert for threats, looking in all directions hoping to spot the next safe zone, and then the satisfaction you feel when you finally survive, knowing that you avoided a terrible fate. This scenario cannot happen in Skyrim, since you're able to save every single second. If you're worried about dying, just press F5. You don't even have to enter a menu to save the game manually and create the place you will respawn after death. This makes anything that can happen in the game less meaningful, since you always have the ability to quick load your last save if something really bad happens. Sure, if you want to be a god that can manipulate time and space, knock yourself out, but I don't think most players enjoy that, even if most of them don't really think about it. I don't think that punishing the player harshly for dying needs to be forced upon the player all the time. I'm sure that not all people want the game to be like that. Maybe you aren't looking for a challenge when you play Skyrim. You're looking for a way to relax and unwind. The game isn't just about combat and survival after all, but also about the story, exploration, decision-making, resource management, and all the other fun stuff you can do. So people might play for different reasons, and you don't want to make someone who plays the game for the story to be forced to restart the whole thing when they die. So what do we do to fix this problem? Resident Evil pulls this off in a pretty good way. Playing the game on normal or easy difficulty makes the player able to save indefinitely. But on hardcore difficulty, you cannot. The game works well in both ways, so making it an option to play on a difficulty that has some sort of punishment is something that we need to create. The game works well in both ways and makes the game fun for both casual and hardcore players. On Nexus Mods, a user by the name of Bralormar released a mod for Skyrim called Death Alternative, Your Money or Your Life. What this mod does is that it replaces the death system with another one that is more complex. Basically, whenever you die, different events can trigger. Sometimes you'll lose a piece of equipment or some gold because someone looted your body. Sometimes you get captured by bandits, or sometimes you just wake up somewhere else. You can bring a follower that can potentially save you when you die like this, because with this mod you don't die immediately when you lose all your health. Instead, you go into a bleed out state. But your follower also has a chance of failing by dying themselves. The mod isn't that great in itself, but the idea is still amazing. When you lose in combat, you lose control over your character, and you might get your stuff stolen, end up captured, or maybe you're lucky to get found by a good Samaritan who will help you get back on your feet. The mod even goes as far as to make the encounters lore-friendly. When I died in my game, I was rescued by a student from the College of Winterhold who told me to maybe go there at some point, which is a place in Skyrim. This is so much better than just going back in time, since it not only makes the game more tense and exciting, but it makes dying interesting rather than frustrating. The bottom line of the mod is that death is actually punishing and is something you want to strive to avoid. It's not the end of the world when you die, but it's still a very unpreferable outcome. Way more games should try to experiment with features like this. Some sort of permadeath or other loss of sorts is so much more interesting than simply getting dragged backwards a minute from where you died. Along with this, quick saving and quick loading should be removed as well. Quick saving and quick loading creates the exact same problem as the death system that doesn't punish you in any way. Both of these systems allow you to go back in time and retry like nothing ever happened. Except, quick saving and quick loading is even worse, since you can freely choose when to go back in time and how far you go. I recommend that you go watch 3Clicks Phillips' video on this topic. It explains it very well, and it's also short. Of course, quick saving and quick loading shouldn't be removed entirely from these games. It allows the player to experiment freely and try things out, which is great for people that want to play the game like that. So again, make it optional. You could also make the argument that players can just choose to not save and reload all the time, or maybe even install mods to remove quick saving and quick loading and make death more interesting with these mods. And while all that is true, you could do that, I don't think this fixes the real problem here. If there's an issue with the product that the consumer buys that needs to be fixed by the consumer or some sort of external software, that means something is wrong with the product and should have been something the developers could have fixed or at least noticed as an issue. Besides, as I said, most players don't think about this being a problem, but the entertainment they get from these games may still suffer from it. And demanding that all players should have the self-control to not press the quick load button is a whole other issue in itself. Not to mention, most games don't have the same modding opportunities as Skyrim, and people who play on console have nowhere near as much opportunity to even use mods as those on PC. So, remove quick saving and quick loading and make death punishing somehow. And I get it, the gaming industry is vicious just like all business industries. If a game company takes a huge risk trying something new out, they could go bankrupt or at least have their game flop, but I would bet that many games would benefit from doing something more interesting than the traditional death system. I'm tired of getting my hand held throughout entire games, knowing that if I die it doesn't matter. I love the harsh punishment in Dark Souls, The Binding of Isaac, XCOM, This War of Mine, Enter the Gungeon, Darkest Dungeon, FTL, Club Penguin, Cultist Simulator, Crypt of the Necrodancer. All these games do it so well, and I actually feel like something is at stake when I play. When I die, I want to get fucked in the ass. So that when I succeed, the reward feels much more like a true accomplishment. If you want to discuss anything in this video, leave a comment. I'd love to talk with you. Thanks for watching.